Hello, and thank you for joining us today for the Women in Leadership, Celebrating Women's Right to Vote and Exploring What's Next panel discussion. I am Dr. Lisa Bono, the Dean of the School for Professional and Continuing Studies at California Lutheran University. It is my immense pleasure to welcome you all today for what we anticipate will be a thoughtful and lively discussion. Our list of attendees is impressive, with students from the 50 and Better program, constituents from the Center for Nonprofit Leadership, Cal Lutheran students, alumni, faculty, staff, and regents, as well as community members. Before we begin, we would like to recognize a few distinguished guests. Assemblymember Jackie Irwin, representing the 44th California Assembly District, Sue Chadwick, Russ Young, and Andrew Binsley, members of the California Lutheran University Board of Regents, and members of the Volunteer Leadership Corps of both the 50 and Better program and the Center for Nonprofit Leadership. As we begin, we pause to acknowledge that California Lutheran University resides on the traditional territory of the Chumash, Bernardino Tataviam, and Muwekma Ohlone people. We remember their connection to this region and give thanks for the opportunity to live, work, learn, and pray on their traditional homeland. We offer our respect to their elders and to all Chumash, Bernardino Tatavian, Muwekma Ohlone people past and present. Today's panel discussion has been co-convened by two programs in the School for Professional and Continuing Studies. The 50 and Better program, also known as FAB, and the Center for Nonprofit Leadership. A bit about the two programs bringing us together today. The 50 and Better program offers non-credit university-level courses to lifelong learners 50 years of age and older who seek to continue learning for the joy of deepening insight, intellectual stimulation, and social engagement. The 50 and Better program offers courses in subjects such as art history, music, the sciences, and much more. Additionally, the program hosts individual lectures. All courses and lectures are currently virtual. As the only management training center of its kind in the region, the Center for Nonprofit Leadership has earned a reputation as the one-stop source for excellence in nonprofit leadership. Through a broad array of programming that is accessible, relevant, timely, and adaptive to the current needs of leaders and organizations, the center plays a critical role in the organizational and leadership development of the nonprofit sector in Ventura County and beyond. And by entrusting their time, energy, and resources with the Center for Nonprofit Leadership, leaders attain higher levels of skills and capacity, and nonprofit organizations achieve a higher level of efficiency and effectiveness in achieving their important missions. And speaking of missions, the mission of the School for Professional and Continuing Studies is to invest in the academic, leadership, and personal enrichment pursuits of post-traditional learners, creating a continuum of educational experiences that support degree attainment, lifelong learning, professional development, leadership excellence, and service to the region. Today's event is hosted with our mission in mind. In the 1800s, women, leaders who were ahead of their time, began the call for equality. In 1848, a group of abolitionist activists met in Seneca Falls, New York, and wrote the Declaration of Sentiments, where it was stated, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." This declaration implied that women should have the right to vote. In 1870, the 15th Amendment was passed, stating that voting rights could not be denied due to race, color, or previous condition of servitude, but it did nothing to incorporate women. Through a flurry of twists and turns, the National American Woman Suffrage Association was born in 1890. Tactics changed and a new generation of activists began focusing on their differences from men as the reason why they deserved to vote. The movement was slowed by the First World War, but on August 18, 1920, the 19th Amendment to the Constitution was ratified, giving women the right to vote. Still, that did not mean all men and women were able to freely vote. Violence, intimidation, and other suppression tactics, for example, literacy tests, poll taxes, and the Jim Crow laws, were used to keep Black individuals from voting. It was not until 1965 that the Voting Rights Act was passed, legislation that banned tactics to disenfranchise Black voters. However, we know all too well that voter suppression is still very real today, 150 years after the passage of the 15th Amendment and 100 years after the passage of the 19th Amendment. It took strong leadership from women like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott to get women the right to vote. And it has taken other heroic women, and yes, some men, to fight for rights for women, to ensure things like women could have their own credit cards, own their own homes, obtain equal rights in the workplace. And yet, women still don't have equal pay for equal work. Working women with children still handle most of the child care and chores at home. And in this time of pandemic, more and more women are the ones leaving the workplace to care for their families. While women make up just over half of the US population, only 7.4% of individuals running Fortune 500 companies are women, and that's an all-time high. In 2018, less than 25% of board seats were filled by women in Fortune 500 companies. 17.9% of those were white women, and 4.6% were women of color. And while there's been a surge in 2018, women still only hold 23.7% of the 535 seats in the United States Congress. And no woman has made it to the United States presidency or vice presidency yet. Given all this, there is much for our panelists to discuss as they reflect upon the centennial celebration of the suffrage movement, voter suppression, where women in leadership positions find themselves today, and what needs to happen for women to gain true equity. Dina Jensen, the director of the Center for Nonprofit Leadership, is moderating today's panel. With nearly 25 years of combined executive and nonprofit management experience, Dina frequently serves as a guest speaker and trainer on leadership development, organizational capacity, board governance, and nonprofit business development. She believes deeply in the power of philanthropy and the nonprofit sector's role in creating a just society. From small efforts taking shape around a kitchen table to our community's most recognized charitable organizations, Dina is committed to the center's mission of helping nonprofit leaders do better at doing good. Dina currently serves on several boards, and in 2018, she was selected Nonprofit Leader of the Year by the Ventura County Leadership Academy and was recognized as the Advocate of the Year by the National Association of Women Business Owners Ventura County Chapter. Dina has a master's in public policy from the University of Southern California and a bachelor's degree in political science with a minor in women's studies from California State University, Long Beach. It is my pleasure to introduce my colleague and friend, Dina Jensen.
Thank you, Lisa. I know that both my father and my husband will be very, very proud by that introduction because both are with us this afternoon enjoying today's event, so I'm really grateful. I appreciate the very warm introduction and also for your leadership and vision in creating today's event. It has really been a week, one particularly demanding for moderators. So I've been taking this role very, very seriously. But as I imagine our learning community today, I see extraordinary women leaders, lifelong learners, community change makers, nonprofit leaders across the lifespan. And I welcome our student colleagues who introduce energy and fresh perspective to our efforts. I thank all of you for taking the time today to be with us and with one another. We assembled together to spend this time with 6 extraordinary women in our community with varied individual, professional, and life experiences and valuable collective insights, all in the spirit of commemorating this 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment to our Constitution. It was a movement that began several decades before the Civil War and was born of the efforts of abolitionists, temperance leagues, and social reformers before them. Voting, an incredible gift, a right, a privilege, and our most humble and important act of civic duty. We've come a long way, and we have much work left to be done. A quick word about time. The essential charge I've been giving is moving us through today's discussion. I ask for your forgiveness if I move us along at a rapid pace. Not each of our panelists will have the opportunity to reflect upon each question, but I welcome spirit dialogue with one another. Should time allow, we'll try to turn to the questions posted in the Q&A feature on Zoom. It's now my honor and my pleasure to introduce today's panel for what we hope will be a lively discussion on our past, our present, and our future. Joining us, please welcome Dr. Lori Varlata, Cal Lutheran University's news president, the first woman in our campus's history to serve in this distinguished role. Welcome, Lori. Dr. Leanne Nielsen, the provost and vice president for academic affairs at Cal Lutheran. Our colleague and friend, Dr. Regina Biddings-Morrill, the vice president for university advancement. Jeanette Sanchez Palacios, who is the district director for California State Assembly District 44. Lori Brown, the council member where I live in the city of Ventura. And Claudia Bill de la Pena, the mayor pro tem for the city of Thousand Oaks. I draw your attention to everyone's full bios, which you received yesterday afternoon via email, and will be included once again in the post-event correspondence. So this summer, our country commemorated 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment. Let us begin there by inviting each of you to reflect a little bit, introduce yourselves, and share your earliest memory of the importance of voting and maybe your personal reflections on the commemoration of women's suffrage. And I'm going to invite Dr. Varlata to get us started.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be here with all of you today. As I was thinking about my very first memory of voting, the 1972 presidential election comes to mind. So I'm dating myself. I was a young girl. It was Richard Nixon and George McGovern. And what I remember so much about the election, frankly, wasn't the landslide victory, but how much my parents had a plan to get to the polls. My father worked 2 full-time jobs for 42 years. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, and we had 1 car. And 2 or 3 days before the election, write-in ballots weren't popular then, or mail-in. I remember them sitting around the dining room table figuring out, could my father afford to take an hour off from his first shift to get to the polls early enough to vote? Would there be enough time for him to get back with the 1 car so my mother could get to the polls, get the car back to him, still get dinner on the table for her kids, watch her husband get to a second shift? He worked 6:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m., had 2 hours off, and then drove bus from 6 p.m. to midnight every day for 42 hours. So it was quite a juggling of responsibilities. But as I look back on that memory, what was clear was that voting was a privilege not to be taken lightly, that it was never a matter of if they would vote, but how they would sacrifice a lot that day to make sure that all of the jobs got done around the house and at the workplace, and that they would be good role models for their children. So interestingly enough, the struggles of parents like mine 50 years ago are so much still the struggles of people today. So while we take for granted, some of us on the panel, that voting is easy and we can mail it in, it's not so easy for so many people, and anything that we can do to help others that are less fortunate than us get to the polls, get registered, and make sure that they exercise, as you said, Dina, their right, their privilege, and their gift would be probably one of the most important and poignant things we can do for democracy.
Thank you, Lori. Leanne.
Hello, everyone. I'm Leanne Nielsen. And I think my earliest memory of voting was when I was really young. I was like 5 or 6 years old, and my mother took me with her to the polling location. And I remember, holding her hand, and she pulled me into that voting booth. And I could sense that this was a really important event. I had to be very quiet and stay still while she focused, and she had her notes with her, and she was very intent on this. that experience still stays with me today. I think that the takeaway for me on this is, if you have young kids or you have grandkids in your home, make sure they see that you're voting. Let them see that you're taking the time to study the issues. The seriousness that you place on voting will make a really big impression on your kids and grandkids. And then reflecting on women's suffrage, I think as I think about women's suffrage, one of the things that shocks me, well, and it really shouldn't shock me, but it shocks me, is how long women fought for this. As Lisa outlined, women were fighting and speaking about this for over 80 years to get the right to vote. And then even when we did get the right to vote, it was another 45 years before Black women in the South could vote. It took generations for this to happen. And, you know, I said a minute ago, it shouldn't shock me how long it took. And it shouldn't shock me because we live in a system that's designed to put men in charge of women. And that's why it took so long. You can't make changes when you're not in charge and when you don't have a seat at the table. So I'm so in awe of the women who fought so hard, were imprisoned, put their lives at risk so that now all of us can vote. But as Lisa said, we still have to keep fighting. We have to fight to get women at the table. We have to fight to get women in leadership roles because we still do not have the same voice and power as men.
Thank you, Leanne. Regina, welcome.
Thanks, Dina. I am thrilled to be sharing the panel with this distinguished set of leaders in our community, including my daily colleagues. And I didn't know how this timing would work, but Leanne's sort of challenge to those of us about bringing our children and grandchildren into this really resounds with me. As I was preparing for today and started to reflect on my own notes and look back about, you know, this whole idea of women in voting, I discovered something that gave me a chill. My mom and dad were steel workers and had high school education, and we're proud to have it because many African Americans didn't get that far in their generation, having been sort of Depression era. And my mom was involved in a club that is a national club. And I was about 5 years old when I really became aware of this club. And it was called the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs, as African Americans were referred to at that time. So this is a national organization that had state chapters and local chapters. So in my hometown in East Chicago, Indiana, my mom was the president of the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs in East Chicago, Indiana. But here is the chiller. The woman who was the national chair was Mary Church Terrell. Mary Church Terrell is a giant in women's suffrage among African American women. I'd had no idea. And in my upbringing, if your parents were involved in club work, that meant you were involved. And so they would make chicken dinners and have benefits because the vote was connected to life. And it was about the way people could buy a house or get an education or have access to equal opportunities. And so the women on that club, whose names and voices and faces I can still see today, they really were in the middle of what we're talking about today when I was just such a young child and I was just following my mom around knowing this is so important because this is going to open up opportunity for people who otherwise would not have it. And I saw that as a child, Leanne, I saw that. And that really inspired and helped me to know women can have power in lots of different ways. And I think that the vote is huge, but the related political power beyond the act itself is huge. It's absolutely huge. And it speaks to the leadership and the opportunities that we all have and enjoy every day.
Thank you, Regina. Jeanette, as we turn our corner to our colleagues who we've invited to join our leadership at Cal Lutheran, I believe that you and Lori and Claudia know only too well the power of vote, having run for political office yourself, and then also, stewarding elected officials. But welcome, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Again, Jeanette Sanchez Palacios, glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And yes, you've mentioned it. My role in the political world has been more on the back end of things, behind the scenes. But I have to tell you, I didn't grow up thinking that I was going to be immersed in this world. I was brought to the United States when I was 4 by my mom, who wanted a better life. You know, your typical immigrant story, seeking a better life, a safer future for her kids. And so she brought me when I was 4. And I've been here ever since. So I didn't grow up voting. I didn't grow up knowing what that meant up until I started going to school. And I would hear just about the different stories about how people get elected, and from city council to president. But I never saw myself as a part of that. And I think it was until that it hit really home in 1994 when Pete Wilson was the governor, and Prop 187, he was a staunch supporter of that. And that initiative was essentially stripping immigrants away from public education and from public health services that they might have, benefited from. And I think it was at that point that I recognized that, wait a minute, I'm one of those people. And it meant that I needed to get involved. It meant that my parents' livelihood could have been also in jeopardy. And I didn't become a US citizen right away. We had been permanent residents for a very long time. And I think we kind of just get comfortable and we think, hey, we're good. And it wasn't until that initiative drove out hundreds and thousands of immigrants to the streets protesting because eventually the initiative was found to be unconstitutional. But I think it's not until it hit me home, it's not until it hit my family personally, that we began to see that we also had a voice, that we could have been, part of this process a long time ago, but we hadn't. And so we were just fortunate enough to be able to wake up to that reality. We've all become citizens. Ever since we've become citizens, we've not missed an election. And I'm proud to say that my own kids, my daughter is, she's of voting age. She's not missed an election either. And my son, who's 15, was talking about the presidential debate. He was going to be watching it with his friends. And so I know that part of our role as women leaders is what we've already said. It's our influence with our family, with our friends, with our coworkers. And I think that that's the benefit that we have when we are in leadership positions. And even when we're not in those highlighted positions, we still have a lot of influence because we are the community. When women succeed, we all know very well that our community succeeds as well. And so for me, it is a privilege to be able to vote. I'm a women's studies major from UCLA with a minor in women's in politics, not thinking that I was going to follow that role, but it plays so much into what I do now. And I'm just grateful for the opportunities that I've had. And, for me, it's a privilege to be able to give back and to be able to influence as well. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jeanette. And Lori, a double alum at Cal Lutheran, welcome home.
Thank you. I'll say thank you really quickly to Lori, Lisa, Leanne, and Dina, and the Center for Nonprofit Leadership for inviting me here today. I feel honored to be here among such great women and the panelists here today. I want to say I'm a councilwoman, I'm a union member, I'm a graduate, as you said, a proud alum of CLU. And many people don't know, which is not in my bio, I do have an associate's in bilingual cross-cultural studies, because even early on, I understood that we were living in an ever-changing environment and I had to be able to adapt, and I needed to understand the people that I lived and worked around. And opportunities like this make me look forward to turning 50. I've always been a perpetual learner. I'm a truth teller, a coach, an advocate, a legislator, my alarm, always got to be on time for everything, a mother, and a minister of the gospel of Christ. Most of all, I'm a friend. And what aren't we all of those things as women? We are nothing without sharing those things that made us who we are. We worked hard, we become educated, we have our careers. And I choose to live my life learning and educating and researching and challenging and innovating and fighting. And this is how I grow. I'm an example of how to lead with a 9-to-5 job, a working class council member whose job is to raise the narrative of those who are tired, who don't have time to engage, and are always asking for permission, but never able to give it. And so that's why I'm here. It was in 1851 that Sojourner Truth delivered her "Ain't I a Woman" speech at the Women's Convention in Ohio, demanding equal rights for Black women. And I just want to say that Black women in my family consider it a voting a privilege because we believe it would be wrestled away from us at any moment. We knew that if in the past, the powers that be would give Black men the right to vote first, before they would even give it to white women themselves, then we as Black women would definitely be the last that they'd ever want to see in the voting booth. Today, we are here as women in leadership at the decision-making tables at the state level, leading institutions like CLU and leading the conversation. And I want to say that today, the suffrage movement to me continues, and voter suppression has been given new life. When the provisions of the 1965 Civil Rights Act, sorry, I'm in a room that just keeps getting dark, were not renewed in 2013. Those provisions should have never had a sunset in the first place. Those provisions should have stayed in effect. That's what's allowing the voter oppression that's happening today to continue happening right now. So what's at stake? The possibility that we may no longer have the right to choose. The loss of Ruth Bader Ginsburg will have lasting effects of which we cannot fathom today or even tomorrow. Do we even continue to watch as spectators, or do we fight? Do we speak up? Do we stand out? And do we mobilize? I can speak for myself when I say that locally we continue to fight to be heard, to be considered equals by our male counterparts, to be taken seriously, to be allowed to speak frankly, matter-of-factly, and unapologetically about issues of great importance without being accused of a manner of all things of being too serious or angry or having an RBF, if you will, or be allowed to have an opinion all of our own without having that opinion appropriated by your male counterparts. These are things I'm talking about that I'm dealing with every day. To be forced to be questioned because you're iced out or ignored by other women, sometimes that's an issue too. So what is that all about? Ain't I a woman? And that's why I'm here today, to reinforce that first statement that was made by Sojourner Truth over 100 years ago. Ain't I a woman? And what can we do as women together to move forward, to push that, to continue to push that agenda? So thank you.
Thank you, Lori. And Claudia, last but not least, welcome.
Thank you.
Also a Cal Lutheran alum.
It is such a pleasure to be here with all of these amazing women. I am in very rich company here. I am Claudia Bill de la Pena, and I am the Mayor Pro Tem for the City of Thousand Oaks, and I am the only woman on the Thousand Oaks City Council, and have been for quite some time. My story is such that I actually moved to the United States when I was not quite 18, and I moved from Germany. So I attended the University of Texas, El Paso in 1984. Lo and behold, who was there campaigning for the election? None other than Geraldine Ferraro, the first woman vice presidential candidate. And I thought, oh my gosh, how cool is this? How amazing is this? Here I am in a country with which I was really not familiar because I grew up in Germany. My mother is Mexican, of Mexican descent. I do have dual citizenship. I was born here, and that is why I was able to return. And I thought, I listened to her, really not knowing all the politics, Republican, conservative, or Democrat, liberal, none of that. But just listening to what she had to say, coming from a woman's standpoint and viewpoint, being the first candidate for vice president, I thought I must vote. And sure enough, when I turned 18, I registered to vote, and I cast my vote for her. That was my first vote ever, and she really set the tone for other women after her, and not only in politics, but elsewhere. So that was my first encounter with voting in the United States for the very first time. I was living by myself. I came over here all by myself, and spent the first few months with my Mexican grandmother in El Paso, and then really lived on my own. And I have been on my own ever since. And I have to say thank you to my mother, who made me a strong person. She was a single mother. And never, just as Jeanette said, I never thought I would end up being in this position that I am in today. I knew I wanted to study, and I wanted to also achieve higher degrees. Congratulations, Jeanette, on being in the doctoral program. That's one of my goals as well. But never did I believe that I would be in a position like this. When I first ran for city council, I was told in Thousand Oaks I would never win because of my last name. My last name was De La Pena, and nobody in Thousand Oaks would vote for that. And I proved them wrong. I defeated an incumbent and was elected to the Thousand Oaks Council in December 2002. And as Leanne also stated, why are women still trying to catch up to men? I defeated a man, by the way. It is because the world, or at least in this country, is still run by men, and they're still in charge. And that is so true. And what can we women do to honor our predecessors who have worked so hard to achieve equal treatment? What can we do? The fight must continue. The fight must continue. We cannot sit idly by. Yes, we are held back because many of us are moms. We have dual duties. We are moms who are going to college and working full time. And, this is just something we have to influence one another, but also family members, moms, parents, they influence us the most. And they tell us to believe in ourselves. And really what we have to do is believe in ourselves, not let the naysayers who say you can't win because of the color of your skin or because of your last name. We cannot be distracted by that background noise. We just have to be focused. Really, that is what we have to do. And we just have to really support each other, especially when it comes to leadership positions, whether it is in business or in education. We have to support one another. So again, it's been a pleasure so far. I love listening to all of your stories, and I can't wait to hear more. Thank you.
Hear, hear. So I'm going to turn our attention to this very unique election year of 2020. Actually, it's been a very curious year in general, all things considered. A global pandemic, efforts towards greater social and racial equity, national election season. Our friends and our colleagues, our family, our acquaintances have been largely social distanced since March. And some of the typical campaign techniques and strategies are maybe not available to us safely. The traditional mechanisms of canvassing and door-to-door visits and campaign rallies are not as safe right now. So each of you had talked about, well, one, the power of the strong mom and dad in modeling civic activity. But what else can we be doing in the year 2020 to not only lift each other up and encourage all people, women in particular, but all people to get out and vote? So I'm gonna go ahead and just popcorn here. And Leanne Nielsen, may I invite you to get us started, and then I'll just kind of go from there.
Sure. Well, as an educator, I guess one of the pieces I think to point out is the real opportunity that we have in education to impact the up and coming generation. So I think that's one of the critical pieces that we need to do is make sure that we are influencing students and the younger generation. We have a lot of students in higher education who are voting for the first time. And we have to emphasize with the younger generation the importance of civic responsibility, the importance of civic engagement, the responsibility that we have as citizens, that voting is part of being a citizen. It's part of being part of this citizenry. So I think reaching young people and reaching the next generation of voters is critical, and I'm saying that as an educator on this panel, and the piece that we can play in making an impact there. And at Cal Lutheran, we focus on educating the whole student, and that's part of it. It's part of it is understanding what you give back to the community and how that's a major part in the role that you play. So I'll just give that aspect as from an education lens.
Fantastic. Lori Brown, can I invite you to give us some thoughts about how we might mobilize Americans around this really, really important right and privilege?
Absolutely. I just want to start off by saying that injustices right now are paralyze the country, paralyze our communities, but it has also galvanized us to action and mobilization and power. And I think being a daughter of, and I didn't get to say what my voting experience was, but I'm going to tie this in here. Two loving, hardworking parents. Many of you know Ventura's an oil town. My dad worked for Union Oil 76, and being a union man is the thing that allowed him to provide for his family, and so that I could get an education that I do have. And so I just wanted to say that voting was an exercise of equality, of equity. And for my family, as we walked to the polls, it was proof we had an equal say. It also said to our neighbors, we deserve to be here too, even when you ignore us. It said, you cannot silence us because this vote gives us a voice. And the life that my parents gave me gave my voice the power. The fact that I had access to an education that allowed me to get, work that allowed me to support myself. Very young, I knew I would run for office, but I didn't expect it to be here. But because things have changed so much, because people have participated in voting and have changed the landscape that allowed someone like me the opportunity to be here before you today, I say to the millennials specifically that you need to be strategic, and you need to move forward strategically. And although you don't always get what you want, because me as a Black woman, when I ran for office in 2013, I came within 53 votes of unseating an incumbent of almost 30 years. And it was a white male, and he had that seat, and nobody felt that it was ever going to be taken away from him. And so did I get discouraged? Sure. But did that keep me from getting up and doing it again? No. I ran again in 2016. Lost terribly. Doesn't matter. I had name recognition, and I worked my ass off to get there. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not sure if but by 2018, when I ran again, third time, they said third time was a charm. The electorate, my constituency, when we went to district, said we vote for Lori resoundingly with 60% of the vote over another candidate who was male. And so what am I saying to you? I'm saying voting is your power. It is your equity. It says you deserve to be here. It says you have a voice. And it also says that it's proof that you're here. So by not voting, you're not exercising that right, that privilege, and you're not establishing yourself as someone who wants to be a part of that process. And so I just challenge them. For me, it would just be a challenge to the millennials that, hey, you are going to be the leaders of tomorrow. Hey, you already are. You're forcing us to do already with Black Lives Matter and protesting and writing letters and showing up. I mean, you have changed the narrative, so continue to do so.
Dr. Varla, I'm sure that your days are filled with reminders of how extraordinary our alum are, but I think that's a great example of it. But I'd really welcome your thoughts about this question about campaign techniques and empowering not only our students, but our colleagues, friends, and family to get out and vote.
Yeah, thank you. So many, well, a few of us on the panel are in our 50s, and we talked about our earliest recollections of voting as going to the polls. And as all of us in California know, we're really, frankly, lucky to live in a state where we have many options, including, of course, mail-in, and what in many states is still called absentee voting. So one of the things that I would, encourage all of us to do is to use our familiarity with technology. And those of you who have children who know more about technology than even I do as the college president, to whatever extent we can reach a helping hand out in this virtual world to perhaps elders in our communities that might not be as familiar with how to register online, making sure that their ballots are getting to their right address. Some of our community members are more likely to have changed addresses in the last year. I just had to do this last week myself. But to whatever extent we can help people get registered online, make sure the ballots are coming to the right address. If they're not, if we have people in our community, again, perhaps some elders or folks that are new to voting who haven't used an online ballot, to even get online and pull it up and show them, here are some things that you want to look at, that help them walk through the online version or the early voting. So while polling is still a very likely mechanism for getting the vote out, and for many communities, we know that in some communities, underrepresented folks and hourly workers still by and large go to the poll. So helping them get there, that's the story I first told with my parents having troubles getting to the polls themselves, is important. But to whatever extent we can get folks registered, we still have 17 more days in California to do so, and make sure that those ballots are getting to the right address, and helping anyone that's a little less familiar with voting in that way, how to do it. It's not intimidating to those of us that are accustomed to doing things online, but we still have a lot of people, friends and families and neighbors, that are a little less familiar with the online nature of voting in this day and age. So those of us that have that familiarity, I think, could go a long ways in helping folks. And folks like Jeanette, who have really engaged young teenagers and young folks, they're primed to help the older folks that might be a little less familiar with the new techniques.
Thank you, Dr. Varlata. I'd like to turn our attention to sort of the second half and inspiration of this, and that is you all as incredible, respected women leaders in our community. And I'd love, you've already given us a little bit of a glimpse of where that came from and who you are as a woman leader, which I know is a journey and an evolution that we all continue to grow and learn and hone our leadership. But I'd love to invite you to reflect on your personal leadership style, who you are, what were your key influences in how you show up as a leader. Who inspires you? And I'm going to go ahead and ask Jeanette to get us started and just reflect on, I know that's a lot of questions, but you can choose.
Thank you. I mean, I think for me, I think back about how I like to be treated and how I like and thrive when I'm working with someone. And so I try to keep that in mind. For me, my leadership style has to do with allowing people around me to flourish and to grow while sort of standing a little far from them so that they can experience it as full possible as they can. Because I truly believe that in order to help others grow, you got to let them take their steps. You could be watching from a distance and you could be sort of guiding them from a distance. But for me, it's very important for someone to feel empowered and for them to feel that their voice is heard and that it matters. And so I take that with me. And again, when I reflect on how I was treated, that is what was given to me by many of my mentors that to this day are very key in all the decisions I make. Someone I look up to obviously is my boss right now, Assemblymember Jackie Irwin, an amazing, amazing leader who really, that is how she has allowed our staff to flourish. And that's one of the things too that I try to embed into our culture, not just at work, but also throughout our community work. I also, the other hat I wear is I'm the president of the Ventura County Women's Political Council, and we have a lot of young women there who are trying to figure out, they want to be involved, but they don't know how. And so I like to take them under my wing, sort of say, but allow them to explore as well. It's almost like seeing a toddler take their first steps, a baby take their first steps, and you're watching from afar, but you know they can do it, and you're just going to kind of hang, behind the scenes to see how far they can go. And I think that that's, for me, that's what has worked best. It has allowed me to grow in my own leadership style, but also allows others to grow and to get to find themselves as well. So for me, that's important to allow them to have that space. And at the same time, know that I have an open door policy. They can always come and ask me questions, and they know that they can rely on me to help them if needed. So that's kind of how I approach things. And I'm always trying to see life with a glass half full instead of half empty, knowing that we go through hardships for a reason so that we can grow and we can learn. And then we also get to benefit and celebrate the successes. So that's part of my leadership style.
Well, it's sometimes hard to see all the head nods on Zoom, but I see many of them. I'm going to ask Claudia. Claudia, we'd love to know a little bit about your leadership style. What inspires you, and what have been your key influences?
Well, thank you for the question. Touched on that just a few minutes ago. What inspires me, or who inspires me? That is my mother. My mother inspires me because she was a single woman in a foreign country and able to raise two daughters by herself, not speaking the language all that well. And to me, there is no stronger example than my mother. And so with what I learned from her is that you have to treat everybody kindly. And it's the golden rule, you have to treat others the way you want to be treated. And what I like to do in leadership when I lead is I like to treat everybody as my equal, not their boss, but as their equal. And I think when you let them know that you value everyone's input and don't think or pretend that you're above them, you get more honest feedback. You are able to accomplish more. And that is also what I tried to do when I was in my trade, which is I was a journalist by trade, working in broadcasting for more than 25 years. So I was in many, many newsrooms. And there has to be open communication. You have to be willing to listen to criticism. You have to be willing to do that. And again, treating others as your equal. Then you have a partner and you have buy-in from them. That is how I like to approach things now, also in government. And really in government now, in the position that I'm in, I'm not so much as a leader as being led by the residents of the city of Thousand Oaks. And you cannot please everybody. That goes without saying. When you're in a position like mine, you will get criticized no matter what. If it's the tone of voice that is misinterpreted, if you're not doing exactly what the residents want to do, then you will be attacked immediately. And so that is where leadership skills come in. How can you diffuse the high anxiety right now with the residents in the city of Thousand Oaks? That has been challenging because everybody is experiencing high anxiety right now. And it's been challenging with the divide that our country is in, not only at national level, but locally, there are big cracks as well. And so I try my best to be an equal and to treat everybody the way I would want to be treated.
Sure. In our work, we talk a lot about how leadership is a critical currency in the nonprofit sector, and never before has that been more important. Regina, I loved hearing the story about your mom and her women's group. it made me think about how apples don't fall very far from trees. And so I'd love to know a little bit more about your leadership style, not just because we're missing each other and we don't get to run into each other on campus, but just to your style, and then what other influences have had an impact on how you show up as a woman leader.
Thanks for that question, Dina. I tell you, as I'm looking at my colleagues on this panel, so many of the threads that I have heard today give me chills. Lori, your description of courage, and Claudia and Jeanette, and of course my colleagues at Cal Lutheran, as women, when we decide to lead, or when I should say, when leadership calls us, because when I think of myself, I had no intention of leading anything. In fact, the word, especially when I was young, would have sent me running for a corner under a blanket crying to suck my thumb. Because the idea of leadership invites all of those things that we're talking about. It invites criticism. It invites, self sort of insecurity. It invites us, especially as women, to start picking ourselves apart, to see what is wrong, what's missing, what's not as good as someone else, whether they be male or female, or of a different gender or race or background. So the courage for me to do it anyway, because I promise you, most of the things that people see me do and say, I can't believe you did that, I was scared. I was scared, okay? And so courage really isn't about absence of fear. It is about doing it anyway, when you know in your heart it's right, even though your stomach is weak. And the first time that I knew I wouldn't be able to escape leadership, I was probably in the 6th grade. And I had won an essay contest. I wrote an essay called What the Bicentennial Means to Me. And it was about voting. And the prize for winning this contest was that you needed to go and give a speech that the whole city was going to come and watch. And everybody knows that public speaking is right above death in terms of the most horrific things that people, really don't want to do. So here's me, 12 years old, and I'm at this big convention hall, and it was Mama Puntillo's, the spaghetti house in our community. And my mom was so proud that I had won this essay contest about patriotism and how important it was to exercise your civic duties. And I'd written this essay thinking I'm just doing another assignment. At that event, I went into the ladies' room 3 times with my mom because I thought, I am going to be sick. I cannot do this. I cannot give this talk, Mama. And please don't make me. And she said, oh no, you can do this. You can do this. And surely enough, after the 3rd time and many, many Hail Marys, I am Roman Catholic. And we were praying in the bathroom that I would be okay, just to be able to deliver this talk about patriotism. And from that experience as a 12-year-old until today, all of us who lead, and I would defy anyone in leadership. And I think it is probably more true for women because I think we suffer imposter syndrome in general. We think somebody's going to find out that we don't know as much as someone else. And it was my mother who told me, you can do what you set your mind to do. Other people's opinions of you are none of your business. So you must take the risk, do what is in you to do. And after that, you don't owe anybody anything else. And so between she and my grandmother, because she got that from her mother, those were my leadership models that basically said courage is something that comes only after you have done the hard thing, not before.
Thank you, Regina. Before we move on from this question, I'm just going to open this up to everyone. What lessons have you learned that you'd like to share And you're welcome just to pop your mic on if you'd like to answer that question. Any takeaways thus far?
Ask the question one more time.
So, what have you learned? Like, what lessons have you learned as a woman leader that you'd like to share before I move us to the next question?
Oh, just quickly, I'll just say I'll mirror what Regina just said, which was feeling the fear and doing it anyway. I read that book. I'm okay, you're okay. I read that book too. Those things and being prepared and doing the hard work. Those are the three things that have got me through literally everything.
I've learned that not to apologize for being results oriented. I think as women that we are expected to be, if not exclusively, primarily relationship oriented, which I am, but in a very tough love kind of way, as the three people at CLU will attest. But there's no apology for, we have to be both. We have to be relationships oriented and results oriented. And, being unapologetic about it, explaining why results matter are really important, and understanding that good results come from good relationships. But some of the things that, again, I think that men would be criticized for less frequently, when we are those things, we somehow feel, not all of us, but at times, that we have to make explicit that we're aware that we're this and it's okay. And for better or worse, results have become just a part of my DNA. Sometimes I'm criticized for it, but I guess Regina's mother was talking to me too, because there's a part of me that understands that some people aren't going to like it, but as a leader, if you can put the common good and the good of your organization ahead of your own ego, then results are okay, and striving for the best results are really important. So I've become unapologetically concerned about results.
Thank you. Leanne, I think that you had turned your mic back on.
No, I think my points were covered. Thanks.
Okay.
Can I add something real quick?
Please, Jeanette.
I think, something that I've learned throughout my own career is that your timing will come, your time will come, and that everything works out. Success is not a straight line. Success is more like a squiggly line that goes all over the place. Sometimes it goes back and then it goes forward again. And I think that that's something for me that I've had to sort of remind myself. I consider myself a quote unquote late bloomer. I didn't graduate I didn't go to college straight out of high school. I had my daughter by the time I went to UCLA, and then I had my son and daughter by the time I got my master's, and now I'm getting a doctorate degree. So timing, is up to the individual. It doesn't have to happen in a certain sequence. And I think that success will lead you to where you want to go, and not necessarily where, you think you have to go.
Please, Claudia.
Yes, I'll make it very brief. What I have learned is to be patient and to be persistent.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. Thank you. The next question really is about, and I think we started to tiptoe towards this, it really is about raising up the next generation, and our role as mentors, and those who one day a different group of 6 extraordinary women will be on this panel, and you all will be the people who they reflect upon, having inspired their careers and their leadership styles. So tell us a little bit about how, both formally and informally, you help develop and mentor other women leaders, particularly women of color, students of color, and next generation leaders. So Leanne, you're nodding, and I'm going to ask you to start.
Sure, happy to. Boy, it's amazing to hear all of your stories, and I'm so struck by the experiences that everybody has had. And Jeanette, you're so right that we go in all different kinds of directions, getting to where we are. I grew up in an environment where I never saw a woman leader. My mother did not have the courage that I hear from Regina. I didn't have the role model growing up. And it wasn't until I really got into the working world and as an adult that I started to get some confidence and started to see female leaders. who impacted me so much. And I know the question is how we mentor others, but I think it all, for me, comes back to how I was mentored and what made the change for me. I would never be in my position of leadership today if it hadn't been for a woman leader who saw potential in me and encouraged me to move into a leadership position. She told me one day about a leadership program, and she said, I want you to go to this program. And she provided the funding for me to participate, and I went off to this 10-day program for leaders in higher education. And when I got there, I thought, what am I doing here? I totally lacked self-confidence. I never imagined myself in a leadership role. I went because somebody that I admired so much said, you got to go do this. And it was her encouragement, her believing in me, that led me to then have that courage and move into something that I never imagined. And we all have that critical role to play of encouraging others. So I think planting the seed, reaching out to up and coming women, we just never know how that one comment that somebody makes can change a person's way of thinking about themselves. So I think telling women what you see in them, giving guidance, building confidence. We know, as was said before, women lack the confidence that men have, and we need to build that up. And I would say for women of color in particular, in mentoring women of color, you've got to have their back. Women of color face obstacles and resistance from those that they lead, and you have to be there to support and to be outspoken about the work that they're doing and the decisions that they're making. So.
Thank you, Leanne. Lori Brown, your thoughts about this? Being mentored and then also now mentoring other women.
Yeah, I love what Leanne said, because I didn't have a defined leader person that I looked up to and was like, that's exactly who I want to be like. I didn't see anyone that actually looked like me that was in leadership, or even there weren't a lot of women doing a lot of big things growing up in the city of Ventura. Increasingly, my parents, solid, honesty, hardworking, accountable, fairness, and all that. As I get old, the older I get, I'm like, they really did lay the foundation for who I am. But for me, thinking and giving me permission or making me feel like I could actually do something, it was a combination of being involved in organizations like NAACP, CAUSE, the Black Caucus at the state level, the VC Leadership Academy, Emerge. I was a part of Gamaliel National Leadership Institute through CAUSE's affiliation with that national organization. And I met people like John R. Hatcher III, which was the president of the local NAACP for 30 plus years. And Maricela Morales, who is now the executive director of CAUSE, she's the first person that said, you should run for city council. I was like, really? Okay. And the rest of it was me doing research and committing myself to the process of learning what leadership was about, like being a part of the Leadership Academy and going to do the training with Gamaliel National Leadership Institute and going to the training with Emerge. I mean, if I didn't make myself available and pay the money and just say, I'm going to do it no matter how hard it is, I don't think I can, and still do it, I would not be where I'm at today. And what I did early on is I read a lot. I'm an avid reader. So to those students who are listening, who are like, I just don't think I can do it. I don't know anybody. There's no one in my family has done it. Don't worry about it. I read 3 political biographies that changed my life. So reading can really make the difference as well. Donna Brazile, I read her biography and I was amazed. I mean, I learned from her. She created her own blueprint. There wasn't one for her. And I'm like, wow, there wasn't one for me either, so I can do what she did. Barbara Jordan, same way, out of Texas. I mean, who would have thunk in the state of Texas, really, at that time? She said, I am the inquisitor. When I saw that, I was amazed. You guys have to research it and figure it out. And of course, Willie Brown. I mean, they had to change the law to get his butt out of office. So I think all those things were so inspiring, encouraging to me. I thought, you know, even though I didn't have a mentor as a child, and I used to like wait for it. I was like, wait, who's gonna guide me? You know, because you watch the karate shows and you see how the people get discovered, and then all of a sudden they're put them under this intense training, and then all of a sudden they bloom into this great, you know, fighter or whatever. And I'm like, I want to fight for justice. And so what I ended up doing in my adult life, I said, whatever career, whatever I learn at any step in the process, I want to give that back. So when I was a project manager for the city of Oxnard and redevelopment for 6 years, my thought was, I want to take all this knowledge about city budgeting and how the cities work and how city services are funded and all the information about Prop 13 and redevelopment, and when redevelopment ended, like how that's going to affect cities and what we could do. And then when I had the opportunity to run for city council, I'm like, this is a perfect opportunity to take what I've known and learned all these years, and it was taken away. That career field is gone. I have to start all over from scratch. But I can take all that knowledge and allow it to be a benefit somewhere else. And so after running for council and during the process of losing until I won, I mentored young girls. You know, I started a program called the Young Ladies of Legacy, you know, and just taught them coping skills and allowed them to learn etiquette and how to love themselves and discover and brand their authentic selves. And you know, I was a substitute teacher for a little while, and I love substitute teaching the at-risk students. And because it was like they didn't get an opportunity to see someone smile at them and give them the opportunity to understand that you can do good too. Even though you've been acting bad all this time and everyone expects the worst from you, somebody loves you and somebody can expect the best from you. So and the last thing I'll say is, and during this election cycle, I also have started the opportunity to train people young and people of color who want to run for office to teach their teams what they need to do. So I've done some campaign management training and some candidate training. And anytime, teaching is one of my loves. And so that's just my life philosophy. So
fantastic. So Jeanette, I want to pass the baton to you because I know that you do this. Well, when your eyes are open, I imagine you do this work when your eyes are closed too, but inspiring women candidates.
In my sleep. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I have to always remind myself and keep in mind is to be empathetic, understand where the women are coming from, those who I mentor and those who mentor me. Because we have to understand the whole person, the person as a whole, and ensure that we know where they're coming from and what makes them tick and what doesn't. And I think that's very important, in just knowing the person genuinely. And so for me, that's something that I always have at the forefront, knowing the person, knowing who they are, knowing their passions, and then guiding them through that, because it's what makes them passionate that's going to lead them to where they're going to go. It's not going to be how I tell them where to go, what to do, but I work with who they are and what their passions are. Because again, just going back to how you want to be treated, it's easy to tell someone what to do and be very, just do this, do that, and ask me questions later. But I think the empathetic way and the way that someone feels appreciated and they grow is through working with their passion and working with what they really want to do. So I try to keep that in mind. And when it comes to women running for office, it's very hard, and we have frank conversations, and you really got to want to do it. No one can convince you to do it. And maybe when they do convince you, you won't feel great about it. So it has to come from the heart, and it has to come from them really wanting to do it. And we get all sorts of women for different reasons wanting to run for office, and we try to help as best as we can and to mentor them. But I think in the end, when the woman believes in herself and when the woman has someone else behind them telling them, yes, you can do it, that's the best thing. You see them flourish and you see them go after their goals and accomplish their goals. And I think that's also the inspiration. We get to see, you know, the scared person who was very shy at the beginning, and then all of a sudden, you know, they're elected into office and they're making amazing moves and amazing policy. And that's really exciting when you get to see them up there and you're like, I know that person, and I used to know them, you know, when they were afraid, and they might be still afraid, but they're up there and they're making things happen. So it's really exciting to be a part of that. And I'm just grateful to be able to have that opportunity.
Thanks, Jeanette. You know, you've all reflected on women's leadership showing up in the home, in the family, in the workplace, in the community, in public policy debates, in very intimate spaces and very public spaces. And the current reality of COVID-19 is brought into really sharp focus because now our women leaders are also teaching their kids at a kitchen table, juggling pressures and uncertainty. So Lisa suggested this, and I think it's bearing out in the experiences that we're witnessing, that women have made these incredible strides in the workplace, but are also being pulled back into the home to take care of aging parents, to take care of children who are going to school at home. So the question, and I'll just open it up, how do we make up for the progress that we've made and now that may be negatively affected by, I know this too shall pass, but in this moment, how do we control for the steps backwards that might be taking place? And I'll invite either Claudia or Regina to give us to get us started.
Okay. Thank you for the question. You are right. There have been articles published about observations that women are now pulling back because of COVID, and they have to do some homeschooling and so forth. The way I view it is we're putting the pause button on this. We're putting a pause button on work or progress for the moment. I don't view this as something where we will suffer a significant setback, because I think that what I'm hearing from all the women here on this panel is there is one common thread, and Jeanette made reference to it, it's to believe in yourself. And every woman on this panel believes in herself, and that is why you have achieved what you have achieved. And we will not allow a pandemic as COVID to set us back many, many years, because we simply have worked so hard. I view this as a pause. It's a bump in our progress. And besides, I have to say that there are spouses who are sharing the burden with homeschooling, for example, as well. I know someone who's married, and both parents are now working part-time because they have to be at home with the children to do the homeschooling. So this is a burden that is shared by both parents as well. But again, the majority most likely is being carried by the mom, by the women. And I just, as I said, we have to be patient and we have to be persistent and not allow this pandemic to set us back further. And I think the way the country is mobilizing right now is evidence that we're not going to take it sitting down, and we are having to move forward.
Thank you, Claudia. Regina.
So I really appreciate this question. And it's a perspective that maybe, you know, some people will find curious. I have come to embrace the challenge of this pandemic, and I will lift up the team that I have the privilege of leading here at Cal Lutheran. This pandemic has allowed us to innovate. It has forced creativity like I have never seen. It has enabled us to abandon sort of long-held status quo ways of doing and being and thinking. I had the opportunity to speak to a group in Chicago through a Zoom session, and I had just did a little inventory in my head because these were high school students I was speaking to who were graduating and sort of, talking about making sense of now and the future. And I reflected that between March and the date of that event that I had participated in more than 500 Zoom meetings. And in the course of that short amount of time, I have learned more about technology. I have sampled more tools, and I had to do it quickly. And the team that I have the privilege of leading here at Cal Lutheran, mostly women. There are some wonderful and creative gentlemen who are on our team, but the advancement team at Cal Lutheran is heavily women who are raising families and dealing with parent support. And they have innovated. I mean, so fast, it would make your head spin. Our productivity went through the roof. This all happened for us during what I would describe as our peak fundraising time frame of the year in the spring. And of course, Lisa, Dina, many others from the CalU community will know everybody was sort of quaking in our boots. What in the world are we going to do? And we shattered last year's records and had more abundant support from our broader community. So it speaks about the loyalty to Cal Lutheran from our alumni, from our donors, from those of us who are lovers of Cal Lutheran. But I believe that this wasn't unique to us. And so this time of having to look and think differently was a time of innovation that I just don't believe we would have even been compelled to dig deep in those ways, because we kept saying, I'm not giving up my goals. Back to what President Varlata is saying, I think I'm a decent person, but I do want those results. They're very important. Because of what I was raised as, I owe it to this institution. It's personal to me to give to this institution what I came here to give, to leave it better than I found it. I won't be here always, but for the season that I am here, I cannot allow a pandemic or anything else to slow our roll. And so my shout out to the team in advancement, in particular, innovation, left and right, doing things like never before, just crushing it. So I am blessed by all the women and the gentlemen on our team. And I think the pandemic kind of paved the way, just saying.
Anybody else want to pop in there? Please, Dr. Varlata.
Lori, I think that as women leaders, we can lead the way in terms of what success looks like in the pandemic, and success looks a little bit differently. So allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, allowing ourselves, I have the good fortune, I haven't lived with my husband for 8 years, and he's out and about, and he said, can I come in? And part of it is little things like, if we are working from home, it's natural for those of you who have children, and kid might be in the background, or, we've all watched NPR and we've all fallen in love with our journalists' pets, etc. These sound like little things, but we don't have to have, because many people don't, a pristine office space in order to be productive. It's hard, but we can, work from our kitchen. We can be drinking water like real people do. We can let our coworkers know that it's okay if you have to get up for a second and make sure that your child's, computer, screen isn't dark. So I think those things are important. I think reminding our staff, particularly our women, I always say that you need to get the job done. And if it gets done at 7 or 8 or 9 o'clock when the kids are in bed, particularly in the pandemic, so be it. I know that means that they're working most of the day, doing some homeschooling, etc. But as long as we have common ground rules where I'm going to get it, whether I get it at 7 p.m. or 3 p.m. is not important to me, but allowing us to be real so people don't feel like they have to, figure out a way to spin it to their supervisor is really important. So being creative with the workday, understanding that the work looks different and is being done from a different place, but celebrating the extraordinary amount of work that's getting done in all kinds of places at all kinds of times. And I think for those of us, in the work world are wondering, to what extent will this affect, real office space and rental space, etc. Because as it turns out, kitchen tables are a really good place to get work done.
Yeah. Kitchen tables also seem to invite a different appetite for trying new things and not guaranteeing that they're all going to be perfect, that we're willing to take a little risk and make some lemonade. Lori, please.
Oh, I was just going to say that the viral killing of George Floyd was a virtual straw that broke the collective back of America. That's what I've been saying. But it did ignite a movement for Black Lives Matter that I didn't think was possible. They had started a long time ago, but people weren't paying attention. And I want to infer that the bold movement of BLM was propelled by the fact that COVID forced us to face our country in real time without distractions, and we're paying more attention. And as a result of paying more attention, we're seeing all these injustices instead of looking at a video on YouTube and saying, oh, I got to go watch the game, or I got to go over here. We were like stuck in our houses. We couldn't go anywhere. All we could do was look at the tragedy. So.
Thank you. Anybody else want to weigh in? Silver lining. My question was taking us down a slightly negative road, but 6 powerful, wonderful, wise women warriors just took us down a different one that I like a lot more. The silver lining, the opportunities. We're with over 100 people on a Friday afternoon from all over our country. You know, the FAB program was supposed to be a small group of classes, you know, with people being in four walls, and now it is a national program. That's incredible, incredible. Workshops that were filled 35 strong in a classroom are now 95 people strong from all over the region, all over the country. So any other silver linings? Jeanette, please.
I was just going to add to that. I mean, I think that is the silver lining in so many ways, that the outreach is just far beyond what we were able to do back in the day when we had to physically be meeting. And I think we get to impact a lot more further that way. But I also, you know, and I don't have small children, but I know many women who do, and I know how frustrating it has been trying to handle and juggle the distance learning for their own kids at the same time trying to handle work, especially when they're single moms. And I think what we end up coming out of the conversations most of the time is that, look, we had, like Claudia mentioned, this is a pause. We got to attack it differently, and we got to think about, you know, what was preoccupying us before. And I think it's given us an ability to just sit down, take a pause, and reevaluate some of the priorities that we thought were priorities and perhaps weren't as much. So to me, that's been the silver lining. And, you know, being able to work from home in regards to the office work that I do, we've been able to help so many more people as well through unemployment, through this crisis, that I think having them come in to meet in person would not have been possible. And so it's just been that we've been able to reach a lot more people through this technology than we have before.
So I know well enough that incredible women leaders likely have a very hard 1:30 on their next on their schedule. So I'm gonna a little bit heartbreaking to come to a close, but I'm just gonna try to wrap us up a little bit. I want to invite each of you. There's been some really great questions in the Q&A about books that really inspire you and your you know, key leadership moment. I'm going to bundle all that stuff in, and you can answer this question any way you'd like. And that is just at least one last takeaway, a word of wisdom or advice that you have for the now 103 people who are still with us on a Friday afternoon. Dr. Varlata, I'm going to invite you to kick us off by answering that question, a takeaway.
I think it's my big takeaway is be yourself, you know, be true to yourself. And I think that our strongest leadership traits come from the things we learned. You heard us all from early on in our life, the things that we can carry forward. So be yourself and be proud of it.
Thank you so much. And Claudia, you introduced the patience and perseverance, and that's really going to be what I take away from your comments today. Thank you for that reminder. But what other takeaways would you like to share with our audience before we close?
Well, at the risk of sounding too cliche, it is, as was mentioned earlier, you gotta have the confidence and you have got to believe in. And it starts with that. You have to have a certain ambition, and that may be instilled by a parent, a sibling, a friend who will plant the seed, who will just set also the example. Every young person whom I meet, whether it is through a panel discussion such as this one, or an interview, or talking to students at colleges or elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, it is that you really, really have to have a focus, and don't listen to the naysayers. Really, don't listen to the detractors, because once you give in to that, it will be much more difficult to reach your goal. Just keep working hard, and don't ever give up.
Thank you, Claudia. Leanne.
Two thoughts I would leave with. One is that your life path may not make sense in the moment. And going back to what Jeanette said, I related to that so much, that life takes so many twists and turns, and it doesn't always make sense in the moment. When I look back on my life, it all makes so much sense, and things that seemed like a bad turn or something that wasn't good, it all comes back around. So I say just stay on the path and trust that it's going in the right direction. And then also, I do want to leave a last thought about the women's suffrage movement. Given the extraordinary efforts of the women who went before us and the sacrifices that they made, my last takeaway is shame on any woman who does not vote.
Thank you. Hear, hear, Leanne. And Jeanette, a takeaway in closing.
Well, as an organizer, I have to tell you to vote. And I have to tell you to make sure you count. So fill out your census if you haven't. Tell your friends and family to do that. And we should be getting our vote by mail ballots soon as well. So make sure you vote and that you vote early. But I think the biggest takeaway, I know that we've been talking about women leadership and women in leadership roles. But I do have to say, because I have a son, we have to teach our sons as well. And we have to make sure that they know women can do anything, and ensure that we also have male allies, because again, some of the fields are penetrated by men primarily, and we could use them as allies, and we can teach them to be our allies and help clear that way for us as well. So.
Thank you for giving voice to a very powerful question and comment in the chat box that was exactly that. Our wonderful, wonderful men partners in this life. So thank you for raising them up. So Lori, a takeaway, a word of advice. I know that you could give us an incredible bibliography of books also, so I'll be following up with you.
So yeah, I mentioned some earlier, so I won't go through books, but I just wanted to just speak to the students again, because I know I was a student at CLU once and before, and you really don't believe you can do the things that they're telling you that you can do, and you don't understand how you're going to get from here to there. You don't have to understand. I just want to encourage you. I was not told to run the second time. I was actually told or asked, or told not to run, and then asked, do you want to be a two-time loser? Then you shouldn't run. So when people are negative like that, what's that, dust it off? Just dust it off. Because sticks and stones may break my bones, but words do hurt, right? but you can feel the fear and do it anyway, like was mentioned by Regina earlier. And I also want to take the time to say that for those of you who are students and are single parents, I don't say it very often, but I was a single parent, or am a single parent. My boys are adults now. The whole entire time I matriculated through CLU, through my bachelor program and the master's program. And I might add, I did the master's program during the last year of my bachelor's program. And while I was campaigning for city council. And I want to answer the two questions in the thing I saw that was really important. What's the most significant barrier to female leadership? It's yourself. My biggest barrier would have been myself. I was scared all the time. I was so scared. I felt like there was a darkness hovering over me sometimes while I was running for office, because there was so many things mounting against me from all sides. But when you know you meant to do something, you just do it and you let the details work themselves out. And sometimes other women. But and I heard someone say, believe in yourself. But I also want to add that believe you can actually do the thing. And sometimes believing in yourself comes like at the tail end of it, because it's really hard to imagine what you can do. And the other question was, how can white males support justice for all, or just initiatives in general? And I would say by showing up, educating yourself, speaking up when you hear about injustice at work, in public, or at home, raising your family to be empathetic, just as mentioned earlier. Like, I have 3 boys and I made sure I drilled it in their heads. And in my first campaign in 2013, my first 2 campaign managers were shrewd, extremely intelligent white males. You have to be open to constructive criticisms, and you have to be able to listen when someone tells you, don't do this, do this. You have to get rid of that, the paranoia and the fear, and I'm not sure what's going on and what's happening. Are they doing this to me? If you want to be successful, you have to find people that can do it, something that you don't know how to do, and can do it better than you. Because they believed in me before I believed in myself. And the last thing I'll say is, on council, you would think my strongest allies were women. They aren't necessarily. A lot of my strongest allies are men. Absolutely. And so if I had a closed mind and wasn't open to whatever the possibilities were, then I wouldn't be where I'm at today. So thank you.
Thank you, Lori. And Regina, our final word before I sum us up and send us off to what I hope will be a very peaceful weekend. Takeaway from today's discussion.
Oh my goodness. First, I have to just give, so much appreciation to the distinguished panel, colleagues who have shared so much, and I've learned so much, and I'm inspired by all of you. I agree with every single thing that has been said, and I will take a page out of what Lori just ended with. Mentorship. Young people, mature people, no matter where you are in your career or your education, strong mentors are the people who lift you when you have all that doubt, dust you off, pick you up and say it's going to be okay, to support you. For me, I've been so blessed. My mentors who told me I could do things I didn't even dream of doing. My mother could take me so far, but there are white men who invited me into higher education and told me that I could lead. Said, oh yeah, you absolutely have what you need. And then from there, I have been blessed with a rich network of leaders across higher education who are Latinx, African American, white, in every grade and strain in between. So I'm blessed with a rich multicultural network of people who have really supported me. And so I have this flex. So I want to say to our students, and I talked to a student last night, build your network. Reach out to people maybe who don't look like you, who you don't know, and ask them for advice, for help. You will be shocked at how strangers will respond positively because they want to see strong people succeed. When your heart is in the right place, I think people feel it. And I think that they want to push you forward, no matter what your story may be. And that has been my blessing. that because I took a chance, reached out to complete and total strangers across the spectrum of individuals, male and female, and all gender identities. Just absolutely beautiful. So students, young people, and not so young, do that and you will not regret it. It will be a wonderful addition and a supplement, not only to your career, but to your life. It will deepen and enrichen in so many ways. So I thank you so much for letting me be a part of this. It has been inspiring beyond anything I could have predicted. So thank you.
Well, thank you all very, very much. Claudia, I wasn't sure if you had one brief last word, and then I'm going to close us up.
It was just very brief. Thank you so much. It is true, as was mentioned, we cannot forget about the men in our lives or the sons in our lives, and to help them actually understand the situation better, life situations better, cultures better. And so obviously I have to say I wouldn't be sitting here if it weren't for the immense help by my husband, who himself has a 24-hour job. And simply, I have to say that today's spouses tend to be more willing to partake in raising the kids, such as doing the homeschooling and all that. I have two 15-year-olds. It is, we do need to encourage our sons as well to respect women. And also what I would like to say is when we do reach out, as Regina said, to other people from all kinds of different spectrums, I mean, don't be afraid to seek out persons who really don't see eye to eye with you. I really would like to recommend that and leave that lasting statement or comment. Thank you.
There was a comment that was shared with me through this conversation about giving thanks to our significant others for being extraordinary men who are brave and courageous and love and support strong women. I'm very, very grateful to count myself as one of those women as well. So in closing, I'm afraid we're going to have to celebrate with a virtual round of applause for each of you and you all collectively. Thank you so much for exceeding our wildest imagination on how we could spend this time together. We're going to go ahead and close. We're going to be sending the recording out to everyone next week. Ladies, thank you so much for being so candid and generous with your thoughts and your insights, and most importantly, with your leadership. We truly, truly appreciate it. And everybody on the call, I will also say thank you for spending your afternoon with us. Please be well and take care of yourselves and of each other. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Take good care.
Thanks, Dina.